Welcome back to Me, Myself, and Liberty. And as you can see, Shelley Landon is joining me. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm glad to have you on. And you've been doing some forums, which is great. The audience is getting to know you. So take a minute for those that may not know who you are and tell us who you are, where you came from, a little bit about Shelley.
Well, I am Shelley Landon, and you can find out a whole lot more about me at friendsoflandon.com or landonforcongress.com. No spaces or dashes. There's video background, there are bio background, all kinds of information. I grew up as a farm girl. My parents were both farmers. I remember picking the harvest of the corn and canning the tomatoes. But it was not here. I grew up in Maryland, and my founding forefathers came over on the second Mayflower. I moved to Oklahoma when I was a college student, so most of my 40 adult years have been here in Oklahoma. And I have taught at Oral Roberts University as well. I have raised a family in Luther, Oklahoma, pastored in Jones, Oklahoma, been a part of the Petroleum Club pastors that would meet up there and pray during the Murrah Federal Building disaster, and we worked to relieve that distress from many, many, many families. And while I was here in Oklahoma, I began to understand how critical the oil crisis was. And then I'm trained in national security and have a keen understanding of the crisis and what is the underlying foundation of our Murrah Federal Building disaster. So I think at this time that the border issue, keeping the border safe, is a very critical one. Some of my very dear friends from the Council for National Policy, where I have interacted in Washington and on an international basis with them, I have been invited via those connections into interviews with CIA, FBI, intelligence divisions, and I understand that there is a honeycomb labyrinth of tunnels underneath of our border, so I am for the wall. I've met Mr. Trump. There's a picture on my website with his thumbs up for my Ground Zero Prayer Shield, National Prayer Shield Project, to pray for him, to pray for the legislators, to pray for the safety of our nation. But even though I'm for the wall, it's a little bit too late, too little. We have a lot more work to do, and I can get into that in detail later. I've been asked to submit some of this information and some of my proposals to the congressional newsletter after I was invited to stand up and speak in Washington about it. I also am the lady who drafted Resolution 550, pursued it, lobbied it, and got a United States unanimous Senate bill to save and preserve our national anthem till the perpetuity of the nation, which ended the crisis that it was going through recently. And I'm working on a homeless veterans bill, and I've literally gone out in the places where they are living in the fields and the woods with a team of folks and loved them and helped them and rescued them, housed them in my own home, fed them, and spent a lot of time speaking with the congressional chaplain and the Senate chaplain in Washington, the head of the VFW, about what we can do, not only with legislation, but what can every civic member do and what can the local clergy and local civic leaders do. So I'm big on education. I have a PhD in education. So these are just a few of my issues. Healthcare, especially right now, to see more funding released for qualified mental health advisors. We've got a lot of trauma, and suicide rate is rising because of COVID-19. So those are just a few of the issues. And then I have a very stout background in diplomatic relations on a global level. We can get into that more later. But in order to fully understand what to do for Oklahoma, it's not a mayor you're electing. It's not a town councilwoman you're electing. I've been a liaison to a school board. That's not the level that you are thinking about what I can do for you in CD5. You are not electing someone to your State House Capitol building. You're electing someone who needs to know what they're doing in Washington, D.C. And not only in Washington, D.C., but what do the decisions we make in Washington, D.C. for you locally and for you federally do in the scope of the enemies of the United States who have us in their crosshairs even still. So to understand the full scope of what needs to be done is very important. You don't need to elect someone who has a learning curve ahead of them and doesn't know when they go into a room who's the good guy and the bad guy. You need someone who does understand the system, who does have experience, who can get in there and go. And that's me.
All right. So we've talked about who you are, and really why you're running, right?
Yes.
So is there anything else you want to say about was there any one issue specific to CD5? I know probably Kendra Horn being elected, that was probably a big part of it. But tell us, so why are you running? I know there's a lot of things that need to change, but what was that thing that really tipped the scales for you?
I think it was when Kendra Horn voted against Donald Trump in the impeachment. And the day that she did it, I happened to be in Washington. I was working on another bill that I've drafted to revoke the Real ID. I've got a website, revokerealid.com, to get rid of the 3 inherent errors within the Real ID for the driver's license. Praise God, Mr. Trump has pushed that back for a year, so we've got some time to work on it. They want to put a gun chip through the SDGs UN resolution that happened in 1992 before 9/11 ever hit, before our real concern markers ever hit. They want to put that in 2020 in all your guns, so I'm against that. And then they now are talking in the WHO, the World Health Organization, with Bill Gates and others, about putting a sugar chip in your hand through a needle, and then putting the Real ID to track you whether you got the mandatory virus or vaccine or not, and whatever else comes with it. So the day that she voted against Trump, I was on the Hill lobbying that bill. And I spoke, and I came out to my car, and when I got out to my car, there was a big Malcolm X scratched into the paint. Capitol Hill police were looking at it for a few minutes, and when they released me and thought I was safe to drive away from a very nice area, I was right in front of the Rayburn building, my tires blew out. So I talked to some of the people who were Reagan fellas. One had been the chief of staff for Ronald Reagan, and the other his secretary. And then one of them was his a campaign manager for Bush. So I have some good friends that keep an eye on the scope of what's happening. And they said, you really should run for office in your capital in Oklahoma County, in the Oklahoma City area. You should run for office there on this level and help us to get that state red again. It's in the heartland. And you should come against Kendra Horn for having done what she just did. She voted against Trump. I'd been keeping an eye on her with everything else as well. And I decided, I came back and I looked into what else she had been voting, her voting record. And I wasn't happy with it at all. And I thought I can do a better job. I can represent the people right there, their local issues, especially with the oil industry. I was mentored by a man named Hayseed Stevens, who was the CEO of Ness Energy. And at the time that he died, he had a well going with a Twin City program with Israel in the southwest end of the Dead Sea. We were going down 12,000 feet after the thermal fuel pockets, and we've got one right here in Oklahoma's territory, Oklahoma state. And what we can do is pull that thermal fuel up out of the ground with wonderful new technologies that are happening and give our shale wells a rest when they need them. They'll populate back together in about 15 years. The oil come right on its own, right back up to the top where anybody can put another drill down there and get it. So there's no reason why our roughnecks should be out of work. We should have people driving, running, rushing to Oklahoma to see if they can interview for another roughneck job and get it. We should be the oil capital of the world once again, and that'll fix our employment problem and a whole lot of more. So I've got enough background to do it, and that's what I want to do.
All right. Well, Shelley has a lot to say and a lot to share with you, so we will be right back.
Used to make two, so now I make two and give one to you. Till your luck break through. Break bread like we did in grade school. I stay grateful for every plateful. Sit at my table, get some great food. When you make choices, they also make do. Share the wealth beyond yourself and stay cool.
Shelley Landon, running for CD5 to represent you, Oklahoma, in the land of the free and the brave, a courageous people who forged a trail in covered wagons here in Oklahoma, where this spout let the mouth of the glory flow out. I declare and decree to you, we will rise again to be the top of the oil industry, to bring oil and gas and light to an entire nation. As the oil capital, now I see that we can once again put jobs back into the lives of Oklahomans by drilling deep for thermal fuel and becoming the oil capital of the world. From the halls of our government to the halls of Washington, D.C., I will fight for you and represent you.
Candidate has entered the running for Oklahoma County Sheriff. Deputy Mike McCauley has been in law enforcement since 1980 and a member of the Oklahoma Second Amendment Association. On his website, McCauley says he's running to, quote, give hope to OCSO's deputies and staff, restore faith in the office of the Oklahoma County Sheriff, and rehabilitate the work environment within the department. McCauley is running against current sheriff.
Sit at my table, get some great food. When you make
Welcome back to Me, Myself, and Liberty. And I'm talking with Shelley Landon, candidate for CD5. Very important. Very important. We have to take out Kendra Horn, so we are trying to help you find the right person to vote for. All right, so Shelley, we talked about in the last segment, you have a very lengthy resume, lots of experience. Using that experience, tell me what it is. What do you want to do with CD5 specifically? What is your goal? What is that thing that you want to hit the ground running with?
Well, the first thing that I want to do for the sake of all Americans is to see this Real ID revoked, taken back to the drawing boards. The original committee, I've talked to Louis Gomart and some others that were on it, it never passed 3 times from the original congressional committee. Finally, Sensenbrenner stuffed it in a military bill, defense bill as a rider, and it became known as the Real ID Act. It has some very severe transgressions in it with national security issues. We've defined a little bit of them earlier in the broadcast. And I really want to see that taken back to committee. I do not ever want to see a COVID-19 mandatory vaccine. First of all, because a vaccine, you're actually taking a part of the virus and injecting it into a human being. So if you want to be a volunteer to do it, that's your privilege. But don't make it mandatory for me. And I know people personally that have died after a flu vaccine. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of data about that. And then don't track me. Let's use an old-fashioned inoculation needle if you ever get to the point of demanding somebody to take it, thinking that you're doing it for the benefit of everyone else. Let's just use an old-fashioned inoculation needle. We don't need our RFID chip in our hand. That brings me to another issue that's also inherent within that. I am a Second Amendment rights person. I pack a pistol myself, a nice pink one. And I believe that we do not need that to be tracked either. And I have talked to the NRA on Capitol Hill and others. I have talked to Joint Chiefs of Staff that have had positions in the Pentagon and others. I'm not allowed to speak of who all, but what all. And I am very aware that there are severe transgressions about where that could end up for us of tracking our guns. No way.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
We got a lot of old pioneers that came into this state who backed them well. And I had a lot of gun battles on the streets to get Oklahoma founded. The other thing is I am very strong pro-life. I was mentored personally by Dr. Mildred Jefferson. She was the first Afro-American woman to ever graduate from Harvard Medical School. At her funeral at Harvard, I was given her Life Achievement Award, and it's hanging in my office, and it will hang in my office in Washington. And that little lady was so bold, she marched up the back staircase at the RNC of Ronald Reagan's hotel room, knocked on his door, spent 3 hours with he and his staff, and converted him from choice to pro-life.
Oh, wow.
So that's who she was, and I'm very, very strong pro-life. And then I have mentioned this a little bit before, but I also have been discussing at great length what our mental health care situation is here in Oklahoma City, and there were over 70 individuals released from a mental health care facility during COVID-19, and they should have been increasing it, not decreasing it, and taking the funding away. Also, I'm an ordained minister as well, and of course I'm in league with several different ministerial associations. You can hear me on the Gospel Station Network with an inspirational moment. I was a talk show host for Salem, and I've been a television producer for Daystar, and many times featured with documentaries on TBN and all the rest of them. So I'm very well acquainted with the faith-based part of this red state, which is largely faith-based. And I absolutely am appalled that during the COVID-19 situation, pastors were restricted and fined and threatened if they dared to even have a drive-up service. Meanwhile, I went to Walmart and Home Depot, did my yard work, whatever, and the cars were packed and nobody was doing social distancing.
And now you can protest and riot.
I'm going to protest big time. And then the next issue is I'm an educator. And I do not believe in some of the educational systems that came down the pike during the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, the Obama administration. I'm the lady that exposed Obama on his lack of citizenship. Mary Fallon called me on the phone, the governor, asked me to hold a conference in Washington, D.C. at the press club. I'm a member of the press myself. And I held the conference. And I had both Republican and Democrat. And the Assistant Attorney General of Pennsylvania, who'd been a lifelong Democrat on the nomination committee, actually came and exposed Obama. And they had a lot to say. But unfortunately, at my press conference, a newscaster stood up and coined the phrase birthers. And that sunk. So you can, when you want to put something down in the news media, you either don't cover the story, it's a no story, that works, or you call it a conspiracy, that works, or you title something like West Bank, well, how big is the West Bank, of Israel, and they get away with that for years, or a term like birthers. So I'm much about showing the truth of who and what the communist socialist regime is in this nation, of which Ken Horn is definitely a big part of it, a bright and shining star on the wrong side.
Oh, yeah.
And my husband that passed away, David Manuel, he and his co-author, Peter Marshall Jr., the son of the late Senate chaplain from our wartime, the World War I, World War II era, they endorsed me, and I was a junior writer with them. They wrote The Light and the Glory, which was the mainstay for all homeschoolers of Christian American heritage education. I wrote with them the junior series, The Crimson Cross, and they met me originally because I was a historian with a big painting that I've done. It's been on Air Force One. I've sung and presented on National Day of Prayer in the Pentagon. It has been also presented at the Capitol Building 5 times on the Washington Mall, and I'm also the lady that got the Star-Spangled Banner saved to the perpetuity of the end of the nation. And its last verse, that we nicknamed the Forgotten Prayer verse, finally officially recognized that venerates and honors our veterans. And do you know what it says? It says, praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. In God is our trust. And believe it or not, I actually got the Democrat socialists to put their hand over their heart and vote for it with me.
Hey, there you go.
So I think this red state, the heartbeat of America, in the crosshairs of everyone watching from the political scale, all of our enemies watching from everywhere else, we need to come into a unified state of being with an awakening spiritually, that our essential functions of mental health care, our essential functions of social care. There's over 18 million children in homes right now that have nothing to eat, with parents who can't even afford to pay for their cell phone any longer. Never mind go on your church or your civic Zoom. They're not watching like you think they are. And those children are in homes of parents that can't even serve them a meal. So we need to become more unified. And what I'm going to do, my 4th grade grandfather, General John Steele, was at the Constitutional Convention. He was born again in the Great Awakening. He was a preacher himself. He was part of the Cooper spy ring. He has some amazing stories in the Washington papers and some of the repositories around that area, where he was actually shot, left for dead twice. I don't know how in the world he got up and walked away. We'll find out when we get to heaven about that one. But he said this mouthful as one of the aide-de-camp of General Washington. He was also on President Jefferson's cabinet in a position, and he was the first Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania, and he guarded our ports. And this is what he stood up and said at that convention. Let us, the benevolent aristocracy, form a federal republic with a democratic form of government whereby the common man may assume he has a vote. Now, what in the world does that mean? It sounds like them there are fighting words. But here's what he meant. They were landowners. That's what the benevolence was. That's what the aristocracy was. They lost their vote over in the parliament for this cross-continental, economy that they had going. The benevolence was the Great Awakening. When there's a move of God and everybody prays in unity together from all sides, it sweetens the halls of government. And then the federal was a Republican, came out of the book of Hebrews and the book of Judges, based on the 3 parts of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, executive, legislative, and judicial. And based on the Bible, and only based on the Bible would it work. And then what does the common man assume he has a vote? Town hall forum. So we're going out again this week. We did it last week. We'll be doing it every weekend now until the end of the elections, meeting with you in your town. You invite us. We'll come to your park. We'll get a permit. The police show up to keep everybody safe. You tell us what you think we need to hear. I don't want to go to Washington with my own ideas of what you need to fix your oil industry, your education, your border. I want to go there knowing what you think I need. So you show up, write us at our website, landedforcongress.com, and we will listen.
All right. Well, I was going to say, where do they find you? All right. Anything else you want to say before we close?
Yes, we've also got friendsoflandon.com, no spaces or dashes. And you can go on there and you can find a copy of my active drafts of bills. We are actively lobbying in Congress. You can find one that I wrote before I was ever elected. And as far as we know, I'm the only woman in American history to ever do this. Now, there were women who had issues they pushed, but they didn't draft the bill themselves, walk the halls of Congress, find the sponsors, and get a unanimous vote on it. I did. So you can find a copy of that one. And then you can find videos about me, my overseas experiences, my paintbrush, teaching young people in the arts visually and musically. I have performed on world stages, and that has taken me into the lives of leaders, kings, presidents of nations, diplomatic circles, and I've been trained in national security, and you can read about that. So I really know what to look for in many issues concerning you, Oklahoma, how to keep you safe, how to keep you prospered, and hopefully how to keep you more unified and happier. God bless you.
All right. I will be right back. Welcome back. All right. Thank you for joining us today. And if these are your candidates, make sure you get behind them and support them with your money and your time. I also want to remind you to support us here at OTU by going to patreon.com/OTU Media, or you can go to OklahomaTaxpayersUnite.com and go to the store and purchase some cool stuff, or just donate your money. That's also fine. I want to remind you that we have a YouTube page, so go to YouTube and type in Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, and you'll find us there. And the college Republicans are putting on a forum for the CD5 candidates on June 12th, so mark your calendars. All right, I will see you next week.